The crack of a gunshot echoed across the prairie, startling a flock of birds into flight as Cassandra Reed clutched her wounded arm, blood seeping through her torn sleeve as she urged her panicked horses forward. The wagon wheel had been hit, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the entire contraption gave way beneath her. Her father's warnings about traveling alone through Colorado territory in 1876 haunted her now, but pride had pushed her forward despite the dangers. The wheel finally splintered completely about 2 miles later, sending the wagon careening sideways. Cassandra was thrown clear, landing hard on the dry grass, the wind knocked from her lungs. The horses, spooked and frantic, broke free from their harnesses and bolted across the open plain, leaving her alone with her damaged wagon and dwindling supplies. Night fell quickly in the foothills. With her arm throbbing and fever setting in, Cassandra managed to drag herself back to the overturned wagon, retrieving what little water remained in her canteen. She had been a fool to think she could make it to Silver Creek on her own after the stagecoach had been delayed in Denver. Now, as darkness enveloped her and the distant howls of coyotes carried on the wind, she wondered if she would survive to see morning. By dawn, the fever had worsened. Cassandra's vision blurred as she attempted to stand, only to collapse back against the broken wagon wheel. Her thoughts drifted to her aunt in Silver Creek, who was expecting her, to the teaching position that awaited her there, to the life she had imagined building for herself after losing everything in St. Louis. As consciousness slipped away, she thought she heard hoofbeats, but dismissed it as another fever dream. Thomas Nathans had been tracking the small band of outlaws for 3 days when he spotted the overturned wagon in the distance. At 32, he'd spent more than half his life in the saddle, first as a cavalry scout during the war, then as a ranch hand, and now working his own modest spread about 10 miles outside of Silver Creek. He approached cautiously, rifle ready, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. What he found instead was a woman, her dress torn and dirty, an improvised bandage wrapped around her left arm, her face flushed with fever as she lay unconscious against the broken wheel of her wagon. "Miss," he called, dismounting quickly. When she didn't respond, he knelt beside her, pressing his palm to her forehead. She was burning up. "Miss, can you hear me?" Cassandra's eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on the man before her. "The horses," she murmured weakly. "They ran." "Don't worry about the horses now," Thomas replied, already assessing her condition. The wound on her arm needed attention and she was severely dehydrated. "I need to get you someplace safe. Can you tell me your name?" "Cassandra," she whispered. "Cassandra Reed. Miss Reed, I'm Thomas Nathans. I've got a ranch not far from here. I'm going to take you there and get you fixed up." He offered his canteen, helping her take small sips of water. "What happened to your arm?" "Outlaws," she managed, grimacing as she tried to sit up straighter. "Shot at the wagon, wanted my belongings." Thomas nodded grimly. "Likely the same bunch I've been tracking. They've been causing trouble all through the territory." He glanced at the ransacked wagon, noticing that most of her possessions had been stolen. "Can you stand?" she tried, but swayed dangerously. Without hesitation, Thomas lifted her into his arms, surprised at how light she felt despite her long skirts and petticoats. "My horse can carry us both back to the ranch. You'll be safe there." "My aunt," Cassandra protested weakly. "In Silver Creek, she's expecting me." "We'll send word once you're better," he assured her, settling her on his horse before mounting behind her. "Right now you need rest and that arm needs tending." As they rode, Cassandra drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her and the strong arms that kept her from falling. Thomas rode carefully, one arm securely around her waist, concerned by the heat radiating from her body and the occasional whimpers of pain she couldn't suppress. The Nathans Ranch was modest compared to some of the larger operations in the territory, but Thomas had built it himself over the past 5 years. A small but sturdy cabin stood near a creek, with a barn and corral nearby. A few cattle grazed on the surrounding land, with mountains rising in the distance. When they arrived, Thomas called out, and an older Mexican man emerged from the barn. "Manuel, need your help here." Thomas carefully dismounted, then lifted Cassandra down. Manuel hurried over, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Dios mío, what happened?" "Found her by a broken wagon about 10 miles east. Outlaws attacked her, shot her in the arm. She's got a bad fever." Thomas carried her toward the cabin. "Can you ride into town and fetch Doc Wilson?" "Sí, patron, right away," Manuel replied, already heading back to the barn for his horse. Inside the cabin, Thomas laid Cassandra gently on his bed. The one-room structure was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a small table with 2 chairs, and a few shelves holding books and supplies. He stoked the banked fire, then gathered clean cloths, a basin of water, and the bottle of whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes. "Miss Reed," he said softly, sitting beside her on the bed, "I need to look at that arm before the doctor gets here." Cassandra's eyes opened, clearer than before. "Where am I?" "My ranch. My man Manuel has gone to fetch the doctor from Silver Creek." He helped her sit up slightly. "The bandage needs changing, and I should clean the wound." She nodded weakly. "Thank you for helping me." Carefully, Thomas unwrapped the makeshift bandage she'd applied. The bullet had grazed her upper arm, leaving a deep furrow that was inflamed and starting to show signs of infection. He poured water into the basin and began gently cleaning away the dried blood. "This will sting," he warned, uncorking the whiskey bottle. "Brace yourself." Cassandra bit her lip but couldn't hold back a cry when the alcohol hit the open wound. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't pull away. "You're brave," Thomas commented, impressed by her fortitude as he applied a clean bandage. "Most men I know would be hollering a lot louder." A faint smile touched her lips. "My father always said I was too stubborn for my own good." "Where is your father now?" "Gone," she said simply, pain flickering across her face that had nothing to do with her physical wound. "Cholera took both my parents last year in St. Louis. I'm on my way to Silver Creek to live with my aunt. She arranged a teaching position for me at the school there." Thomas nodded, offering her water again. "Rest now, the doctor will be here soon." While she dozed, Thomas salvaged what he could from the saddlebags he'd taken from her wagon: a small bundle of clothes, a worn Bible, a locket with tiny portraits inside that he assumed were her parents', and a letter confirming her teaching position in Silver Creek. Dr. Wilson arrived 2 hours later, his bag in hand and a concerned expression on his face. "Manuel said you found a woman shot by outlaws." Thomas led him to the bed. "Cassandra Reed. She was headed to Silver Creek to stay with her aunt and teach at the school. Outlaws attacked her wagon, shot her, and stole most of her belongings." The doctor examined Cassandra thoroughly, cleaning the wound again and applying a proper dressing. "The bullet just grazed her, thankfully, but there's infection setting in. I've left medicine that should help with the fever. Keep the wound clean and make sure she drinks plenty of fluids." He packed up his bag. "She shouldn't be moved for at least a week, maybe 2. "I'll take care of her," Thomas assured him. After the doctor left, Thomas pulled a chair beside the bed and settled in for a long night. He bathed Cassandra's forehead with cool cloths, coaxed her to drink broth and water when she woke, and administered the medicine Dr. Wilson had left. By morning, her fever had broken, and she slept more peacefully. When she finally woke properly, the sun was streaming through the cabin's small windows. Thomas was at the stove, cooking something that smelled delicious. He turned at the sound of her movement. "Good morning," he said, a smile warming his usually serious face. "Hungry?" Cassandra struggled to sit up, surprised at how weak she felt. "Yes, actually, how long have I been here?" 2 days, Thomas replied, bringing her a plate of eggs and bacon. "You had us worried for a while." She accepted the food gratefully. "Thank you for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." "No need for thanks." He pulled the chair closer to the bed. "I sent Manuel to Silver Creek yesterday to let your aunt know you're safe. He should be back by evening with a message from her." As she ate, Cassandra studied her rescuer properly for the first time. Thomas Nathans was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the western sun. His dark brown hair was a bit too long, curling slightly at the nape of his neck, and a short beard covered his jaw. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about his steady gaze and the quiet confidence with which he moved. "Have you lived here long?" she asked, curious about this man who had saved her life. 5 years on my own place," he replied. "Before that, I worked other ranches in the territory. Came west after the war needed open spaces after what I saw back east." "You fought in the war," he nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "Cavalry, saw things no man should see." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the subject. "What about you? Teaching school in Silver Creek, that's quite an undertaking. Town's still pretty rough." "I taught in St. Louis for 2 years, she explained. "After my parents died, staying there was too painful. My aunt suggested I come west, start fresh." "Well," Thomas said, taking her empty plate, "seems like your fresh start got a bit delayed." "Yes," she agreed with a small smile, "though I'm grateful for the delay considering the alternative." Thomas busied himself with washing the dishes, uncomfortable with her gratitude. When he finished, he turned back to find her attempting to stand. "Whoa there," he said, hurrying to her side. "Doc said you need to rest that arm for at least a week." "I can't impose on you for a week," she protested. "I should get to Silver Creek as soon as possible." "Miss Reed," Thomas said firmly, guiding her back to the bed, "your wagon is broken, your horses are gone, and you've got a healing bullet wound. You're not going anywhere just yet." She looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close he was standing, of the gentle pressure of his hand on her shoulder. "I don't even have proper clothes," she said weakly, gesturing to the borrowed shirt she wore over her chemise, her own dress having been too torn and bloodied to salvage. "Manuel's bringing supplies from town, including some things from your aunt." He stepped back, giving her space. "Until then, you'll have to make do with my shirts, I'm afraid." Cassandra sighed, recognizing the logic in his words. "Very well, Mr. Nathans. It seems I'm at your mercy for the time being." A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Not at my mercy, Miss Reed, just under my roof for a spell." His expression grew more serious. "And while you're here, you might as well call me Thomas." "Then you must call me Cassandra," she replied. Manuel returned that evening with supplies, letters, and a bundle of clothing from Cassandra's aunt, Harriet Simmons. The letter expressed profound gratitude to Thomas for saving her niece and insisted that Cassandra stay at the ranch until she was fully recovered. "Your aunt seems like a sensible woman," Thomas commented after reading the letter. "The school board has postponed the start of term by 2 weeks to accommodate your recovery." Cassandra was touched by her aunt's concern but frustrated by the delay. 2 more weeks, but what will I do here all that time?" Thomas shrugged. "Rest, read. I've got a fair collection of books you're welcome to, and once you're stronger you can help around the place if you've a mind to." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Thomas would rise before dawn to tend to his cattle and ranch chores, leaving coffee brewing for Cassandra. She would wake to an empty cabin, dress in the simple skirts and blouses her aunt had sent, and make breakfast for when he returned mid-morning. They would eat together, their conversation gradually becoming less stilted as they grew more comfortable with each other. In the afternoons, while Thomas worked, Cassandra would read or write letters to her aunt. In the evenings, they shared simple meals, and sometimes Thomas would read aloud from one of his books while Cassandra mended clothes or helped prepare food for the next day. A week after her arrival, Cassandra's arm had healed enough that she could help with light chores. She insisted on taking over the cooking entirely, much to Thomas's relief. "I've been living on my own cooking for too long," he admitted one evening as they finished a stew she had prepared. "A man can survive on bacon, beans, and coffee, but this is living." Cassandra laughed, the sound warming the small cabin. "It's the least I can do, though I must admit I'm not used to cooking for a man with such an appetite." Thomas looked almost embarrassed. Hard work makes a man hungry. I wasn't complaining, she assured him. It's satisfying to cook for someone who appreciates it so thoroughly. As the days passed, Cassandra found herself watching Thomas when he wasn't aware the way his hands, rough from work but surprisingly gentle, handled tools or animals. How his serious expression would soften when he spoke of his land or his hopes for the future. The rare but transformative smile that would light his face when something amused him. For his part, Thomas discovered himself finding excuses to return to the cabin throughout the day to check on her arm, he told himself, or to see if she needed anything from town. In truth, he was drawn to her presence, to the way she had brought warmth and conversation to his solitary life. One afternoon, about 10 days after he had found her, Thomas returned to the cabin to find Cassandra sitting on the small porch, her face tilted up to catch the autumn sunshine. "Beautiful day," he commented, settling beside her on the rough-hewn bench. She agreed, opening her eyes to look at him. "I was just thinking how different everything is here from St. Louis. The air smells different cleaner somehow, and the sky goes on forever." "That's why I came west," Thomas admitted. "Needed space to breathe after the war. Couldn't abide walls and crowds anymore." "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." Thomas was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Yes, sometimes." But being lonely seemed a fair price for peace. The honesty in his answer touched her. "And now, do you have peace?" He turned to look at her then, his gaze direct and unguarded. "I thought I did, now I'm not so sure." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Cassandra felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked away first. "I should check on the bread I'm baking," she murmured, rising quickly. Thomas watched her go, mentally berating himself for the admission. The last thing this educated city woman needed was the unwanted attention of a rough rancher. She would be leaving soon for Silver Creek, for her teaching position and the society of the growing town. Better to keep his feelings to himself. That evening, their usual easy conversation was replaced by awkward silences. Cassandra retired early, claiming fatigue while Thomas stayed up late, a book open on his lap but unread as he stared into the fire. The next morning, Thomas rose even earlier than usual, eager to escape the confines of the cabin and the tension that had developed between them. He left before Cassandra woke, riding out to check on a section of fence that needed repair in the furthest corner of his property. When he returned in the late afternoon, dusty and tired, he found Cassandra standing in the yard, watching the road with a worried expression. She hurried toward him as he dismounted. "You've been gone all day," she said, concern evident in her voice. "I was beginning to worry." "Had fence work needed doing," he replied, not meeting her eyes as he unsaddled his horse. "Lost track of time." "Oh." She stepped back, hurt by his dismissive tone. "Well, there's stew keeping warm on the stove. I'll leave you to it then." As she turned to go, Thomas caught her arm gently. "Cassandra, wait, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you or to be short just now." She faced him, her expression guarded. "It's fine, Thomas. This is your home. You don't owe me explanations for your comings and goings." "That's just it," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "It hasn't felt like just my home these past days, and that's unsettling." "Unsettling." She repeated, uncertain of his meaning. Thomas struggled to find the right words. "I've been on my own a long time. Got used to the quiet, to answering to no one. Then suddenly you're here and there's talking and laughter and someone noticing when I'm gone too long." He met her gaze directly. "It's not unpleasant, that's what's unsettling." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Because I'll be leaving soon," he nodded, unable to deny it. 2 more days and you'll be well enough to go to Silver Creek. Your aunt's expecting you, the school's waiting for their teacher." "Yes," Cassandra said softly. "That was the plan." They stood in silence, the unspoken hanging between them. Finally, Thomas stepped back. "I should tend to the horse," he said, leading the animal toward the barn. Cassandra watched him go, conflicting emotions churning within her. She had come west for a fresh start, for independence, for the teaching position her aunt had secured. She hadn't planned on meeting a man like Thomas Nathan's quiet, honorable, with depths of feeling hidden beneath his stoic exterior. That night at dinner, the tension remained, though both made efforts at normal conversation. As they finished eating, Thomas cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, "about your situation. Manuel found your horses yesterday, wandering about 10 miles south of where I found you." "They're in the barn now," Cassandra brightened. "That's wonderful news. And I've been working on fixing up that old buggy in the barn," he continued. "It's not much, but it'll get you to Silver Creek comfortably enough. We can head out day after tomorrow." "Oh." She absently traced patterns on the wooden tabletop with her fingertip. "That's very thoughtful of you." Thomas nodded, taking their plates to the wash basin. "Least I could do." Cassandra watched him, noting the stiff set of his shoulders, the careful way he avoided looking at her directly. Making a sudden decision, she stood and walked to his side. "Thomas," she said quietly, "what if I didn't go?" His hands stilled in the water. What if I stayed here, not permanently perhaps, but longer than we planned?" She took a deep breath. "I could still teach in Silver Creek. It's not that far. I could ride in each day." Thomas turned to face her, water dripping from his hands. 10 miles each way every day, that's no small journey for a woman alone." "Then perhaps not every day," she countered. "Maybe I could stay in town during the weekend." "Come back here on weekends." Hope flickered in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "Your aunt's expecting you to live with her. The school board arranged for you to board in town." "Plans can change," Cassandra said simply, "if there's reason enough to change them." Thomas dried his hands slowly on a towel, buying time to gather his thoughts. "And is there reason enough, Cassandra?" She met his gaze steadily. "I believe there could be, if you wanted me to stay." The towel dropped forgotten to the floor as Thomas took a step toward her. "I'm not a wealthy man," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This cabin's small, life out here is hard, especially in winter." "I didn't come west expecting luxury," she replied, "and the cabin could be expanded in time. People would talk. A single woman living at a bachelor's ranch." A smile touched her lips. "People always talk. My aunt can vouch for my reputation, and perhaps I wouldn't remain single indefinitely." Thomas's breath caught at her boldness. "Cassandra, are you saying what I think you're saying?" She colored slightly but held his gaze. "I'm saying that when you found me by that broken wagon, fed me and brought me here, something began that I'm not ready to end just because my arm has healed." He closed the distance between them, reaching out to touch her cheek with a reverent hand. "When I found you there, half dead from fever, all I could think was getting you somewhere safe. Then you woke up in my bed in my home and suddenly everything felt different, like something that had been missing slipped into place without my even knowing it had been gone." Cassandra leaned into his touch. "I was supposed to start a new life in Silver Creek. I never expected to find a new life before I even got there." Thomas hesitated only a moment before lowering his head to kiss her gently. Her hands came up to rest on his chest as she responded, the kiss deepening with shared emotion. When they finally parted, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as my guest or my patient. Stay because you want to build something here with me." "Yes," she answered simply. "Though my aunt will have opinions about the proper way to go about this." A rare laugh escaped him. "I imagine she will. We'll ride to Silver Creek tomorrow, speak to her together, do things properly." "She may insist on a proper courtship period," Cassandra warned, smiling. "I can court you properly," Thomas assured her, pulling her closer. "Though I admit, starting with you living under my roof is somewhat unconventional." "Our entire acquaintance has been unconventional," she pointed out. "Why change now?" The next day, they rode to Silver Creek together, Cassandra nervously anticipating her aunt's reaction. To her surprise, Harriet Simmons took one look at the pair of them and nodded knowingly. "I suspected as much when Manuel told me how Thomas hadn't left your side during the fever," she commented, "and how you were healing so comfortably at his ranch. Then you're not shocked by our arrangement," Cassandra asked. Harriet snorted inelegantly. Child, this is the frontier. Conventional arrangements often give way to practical ones. Besides, she added with a shrewd glance at Thomas, a woman my age recognizes when two people have found something worth holding on to. With her aunt's blessing, they spoke to the school board, who agreed that Cassandra could teach during the week and return to the ranch on weekends, provided she maintained appropriate propriety. Thomas, in turn, promised to have them properly married before the first snow fell. True to his word, they were wed 6 weeks later in Silver Creek's small church, with Harriet beaming approval and the entire town turning out to see their new schoolteacher marry the quiet rancher who had saved her life. That winter was the happiest of Thomas's life. The cabin that had once felt simply like shelter now felt like home with Cassandra there. They expanded it in the spring, adding a proper bedroom and a small room Cassandra used for lesson preparation. Her students adored her, and the school board eventually agreed to a 3-day teaching schedule that allowed her more time at the ranch. 1 year after he had found her collapsed by her broken wagon, Thomas presented Cassandra with a rocking chair for the porch, handcrafted by the town's carpenter. For next spring, he explained, a tender look in his eyes as he placed a hand on her slightly rounded belly. When our family grows, Cassandra covered his hand with her own. Who would have thought that being shot at by outlaws would lead to such happiness? She mused. When you found me that day and said you'll live with me now, I thought you were just offering temporary shelter. Thomas pulled her close. I didn't know then that I was offering you my heart along with my home, but I'm mighty glad you accepted both. As am I, she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as the sun set over their land, painting the Colorado sky in shades of gold and promise. Their daughter was born the following spring, strong and healthy with her father's dark hair and her mother's determined spirit. They named her Hope, for what had brought them together and what continued to grow between them with each passing season on the land they both now called home. When visitors came to the thriving Nathan's ranch in later years, they often remarked on the deep bond between Thomas and Cassandra, still evident in the way they moved in tandem, anticipated each other's needs, and exchanged glances full of private meaning. Few knew the full story of how they met of a broken wagon, a bullet wound, and the simple words that had changed both their lives. You'll live with me now. But Thomas and Cassandra knew. And in quiet moments, when the day's work was done and their children were asleep, they would sit together on the porch in matching rocking chairs, hands entwined, and marvel at how the worst day of Cassandra's life had led to the best years of both their lives, all because a cowboy had found her collapsed by a broken wagon and decided in that moment that he would never let her go.